allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tibbetts, we are at public input, and you are my only card up here, so if you want to come start us off, that'd be great.
Good morning, board members, Superintendent Cornegay. Just a couple of quick observations regarding the evaluation. I would be more prepared, but this didn't get on the website in a timely manner for me to have the time I need to study it. But I will just simply reflect on some of the things. First of all the way at the end it said, hey, we're doing a great job. We're heading in the right direction. But 50% of our goals are emerging. Whoa, that's a lot out there to pay attention to and make it happen. So there's going to be, I think, on your part, and it reflects it in the document, a re-examination of the superintendent's goals and objectives versus your goals and objectives, and there needs to be some refinement. And I would just share some observations I made. The system integrates digital resources into teaching, learning, and operations needs improvement. Boy, from what I see in my classroom and what I've observed, that's so very true. Learners engage in differentiated learning opportunities and or activities that meet their needs, rated very low at 1.93, and the other one, learners demonstrate and or have opportunities to develop empathy, respect, appreciation, differences in abilities, etc. I want to tell you from observation, this wondrous idea that the brighter kids will teach the less bright isn't happening. What happens is the brighter kids are more than willing to help the less bright once their work is done. And they aren't getting any benefit from helping these younger kids. They'll do the work for them, they'll tell them the answer, but it isn't an interaction that one would hope for. If we really expect that to happen, boy, there's a lot of work left. And I'm not sure it's possible. And I think we need to re-examine that in terms of everyday teaching of these students, to put the burden on other students to teach is a nice concept, but the reality of it really needs to be examined. Great start, a lot of work left ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. At this time, we are going to do our accreditation report, and Dr. Desjardins, come and good morning.
Good morning, board members. How are you? So as you all know, we had the accreditation visit in November, and we received the report that's pending final approval, which will be at the end of March, but we don't predict that many changes will occur. But the accreditation visit was November 5th through the 8th.
Can you scoot your microphone a little bit closer to you?
So the accreditation review report provides results that should be used as a guide and informs system-wide effectiveness and enhanced student learning. The results provide feedback on the institution's capacity to engage and commit to continuous improvement. The findings contain key actions from the results of the observation, data, and deliberations of the engagement review team. And the results provide a holistic measure of overall performance based on a comprehensive set of standards and data reflected by a score called the Index of Quality, Educational Quality. So the continuous improvement journey is fluid and it is ongoing. We have scored emerging and 3 components that guide the improvement journey. The institution has collected sufficient and quality data to identify school improvement needs. The implications from the analysis of the data has been identified and used for development of key strategic goals. And the institution demonstrates the capacity to implement their continuous improvement journey. The overall scoring, if you can refer to the detailed report, it will break down all the standards for which we were scored in this area. For leadership capacity, which is domain 1, we had 4 standards that exceed expectations, and we had 2 standards that meet expectations, 5 standards that are emerging. In the learning capacity domain, we had 4 that meet expectations, 7 that are emerging, and 1 that needs improvement. The resource capacity, we had 1 that exceeds expectations, 3 that meets expectations, 3 that are emerging, and 1 that needs an improvement. So the overall total for this standards diagnostic report was 5 that exceed, 9 that meet, 15 that are emerging, and 2 that needs improvement. And again, if you look at the main report, it will break down all the standards and give you some detail. They find, yes, sure.
A quick question there, just so I can get a good frame of mind as we continue through the rest of this. Are they just a harsh grader, or are we, I'm trying to kind of put this in a frame here, because more than half of the results fell on the bottom half of the spectrum here. And so I'm just trying to understand, do they grade all districts as harshly, or were there that many areas that were lagging behind it?
The overall, I guess, feeling that I got from reading the entire report was that we were a district that was coming together and emerging with new goals. We had a new superintendent, obviously, that came on in March, and when they visited, it was November. So I think when you take in the holistic approach that they used, that they found that we had some areas for which we were at the beginning of some great work, and they noted that. So I don't know if you want to just say something.
I
as
wanted
well.
to add as well, we were the first district who have gone through this accreditation underneath their new standards. So we were their test pilot, and I know that I think that's why it took them so long to get the report back, is that there was lots of discussion about how do we rate within the new standards, and just that inter-rater reliability that's so important that they were still trying to get together. So I think that's important to note that I think this is reflective of all of our work as well as theirs as we transition. And we volunteered. They had asked us because they knew that we were a district that was emerging with new leadership and a new vision and direction, that they thought that this might help them as they developed further their standards and how they would rate districts. I think it's just important to note that.
All right, thanks.
So in the area of the findings, you will also note that they had given us feedback on improvement priorities, opportunities for improvement, and powerful practices. Here in the verbal report that FANSED gave us when they left, they said that we were one of the districts that had more powerful practices than normal, which we had 6. We did have 4 opportunities for improvement and 8 improvement priorities. Our overall score was 296.07 on a scale of 100 to 400, which is in the normal range of performance. But as Mrs. Cornegie said, we were the very first under this new scoring system. So we need to take that into perspective as well. So when we break down, excuse me,
What are powerful tools or what are
powerful
those?
practices,
Powerful.
they are, powerful practices reflect noteworthy observations and actions that have yielded clear results in student achievement or organizational effectiveness. So starting with improvement priorities, we reflect identified areas that had the greatest impact on on improving student performance and organizational effectiveness. So, yes. Oh, keep going? Okay. That's all right. Got it. So, the first one is implement systemic processes to determine program effectiveness, build capacity to implement effective strategies for key objectives, establish systemic strategies for literacy and writing, evaluate current offerings in support of college and career readiness, align budgetary practices with key priorities, monitor the Learning Walk tool for improving instruction, monitor non-cognitive development in support of collaborative learning structures, and establish system-wide strategies and language supporting the instructional vision. I think it's worth noting here that many of these strategies we are and have been addressing since in fruition, actually. So opportunities for improvement are those actions that guide and direct institutions to areas that are worthy of additional attention. So one of the findings was that they wanted us to take another look at analyzing Title I designation and allocation practices. They also wanted us to review and revise, if appropriate, the vision and mission and beliefs within the context of our district's new direction. Enhance security and safety measures as access to technology increases, and then update our website to reflect current and future direction of Lake County schools. And again, I think it's worth noting that many of these strategies we have addressed and are continuing to monitor. All right, so here's our powerful practices. They, again, are observations and actions that yield results that exceed what is expected. One of the areas that they were very complimentary on when you have a chance to read the report was the cohesiveness and effective governance of the leadership team, which is essentially the board and the relationship with the superintendent. So they were very impressed with that. Engagement of stakeholder groups in support of the new direction of the district was another strength. And again, as we talk about being in that emerging status, one of the things that they complimented us on was our Mrs. Cornegie's and leadership team's ability to go out and listen and visit schools and truly take into consideration the feedback before making decisions. What they're hopeful is, now that we have a great start and a good foundation in that our documents and our reports will start to then align with the feedback coming from the various stakeholder groups. So a third strength and powerful practice was resources and support for the Educational Foundation of Lake County. They're incredibly impressed with our foundation and our relationship with that organization. They also were impressed with our effective induction program for new teachers, effective leadership development program for leadership opportunities as well. So that would be our leadership track for our administration and our future administrators. And then the last one was engagement of stakeholder invested in supporting a culture of teaching and learning. So here they essentially said that our culture and climate is focused on the teaching and learning and the academics in the schools. So the recommendations and next steps. We are accredited, they're recommending accreditation for the next 5-year term. And then as the report will detail, they wanted us to share our findings, develop those plans, strengthen improvement efforts, celebrate successes noted in our powerful practices, and then continue our improvement journey. Do we have any questions?
Board members, any questions?
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Dr. All right, Mr. Weeks. We're ready to talk about performance matters. Yeah, no problem.
As Mr. Weeks comes forward, if you'll remember when the board approved the use of Performance Matters as our new data system. One of the things that you asked for is that once we had some implementation and training complete, that we'd come back and give you an update so you could see how it's being utilized in the classrooms and in the school and enhancing our data, which was one of our emerging areas that we needed to focus on. And so I think he has a demonstration this morning to give you an update, and I know Dwayne and his team have done a lot of work over the past several months as we've rolled out this new system. So
You're probably wondering what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to do a couple of different things. We're going to get your hands into Performance Matters a little bit today and give you a guided tour of the functionality that's there from the analytics standpoint at both the student, or well, really, honestly, the teacher, the school, the region, and the district level, and kind of get you in there and get familiar with it. But I would be, I'm always about shameless plugs. And one of the things that we've been working on in the last little bit is that we have been working on this Chromebook project. And so as you noticed, I just took the Chromebook out of the box. And all of you have a Chromebook in front of you, which will help you sign on to in a short period of time. That way you can kind of sort of poke around in Performance Matters and see. But what's been great about these is these have started rolling out throughout the district. And at $214 a piece, it pops out of the box. We turn it on, and then you sign on, and this one's yours. And so what is neat about that is that it's made the deployment of these devices very, very quickly, and it's going to be the vehicle for our demonstration today. We're very excited about that. As we saw the accreditation report, the ability to kind of sort of increase that technological capacity is going to be very, very important, and I think this is a key piece to it. However, real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through kind of sort of the high points of Performance Matters. And the goal will be, and I haven't ever quite done this in a board meeting or so, one of the things that Dr. Weiskopf and Ms. Cornegie had asked me to do is they had asked me to actually almost conduct this slightly, almost like a training. So this is a new experience for me because even though I've been in front of the boards, school boards a lot of times, I've never actually done it like this. It'll make for riveting television at home, I'm sure. but with that said, to kind of get you in, what we're going to go ahead and do is that this part, for those, playing along at home, we're going to go ahead and have you open the Chromebook. We did provide you a device because I know sometimes the trackpad learning curve can be not a lot of fun. And these devices actually just came out of the box as well. I'll get it for you. Runaway mouse.
I haven't used one in a long time.
I know. What is this?
I know.
I'll say, if you don't want it, you can unplug it and go straight to the trackpad if you would like, if you're that kind of free spirit.
All right. I'm gonna live on the
But
edge.
with that said, what will happen is Betty will be behind you to kind of assist. Signing into the Chromebook is pretty easy. When it turns on, and it should basically, when you pop open the case, you should see a login screen, which is actually our student portal. And that student portal, it's also our staff portal, will basically sign you in or authenticate you into the Chromebook. What it's going to ask you for is your, and here's the test for y'all, your username and password. Your username is usually your last name and then the first initial. But if not, then we'll help you with that. And if not, then we'll sign on for you because we're nice people like that. The other thing too, and again, y'all at home, I'm sure, again, not the most exciting thing is you'll actually have to pick like a little icon which represents your best emotional state or whatever. There's flowers, there's records, there's pizza, or whatever else. The most important decision you'll make all day, I'm sure. But with that said, once you do that, then it will basically take you to a desktop, and then in the bottom corner there'll be an icon for Chrome, but the portal will basically open up.
And then we ignore the EULA as always and sign.
Oh, you do? It's Google, so you can't ignore it, unfortunately. So yeah, you'll have to go ahead and do that. And then, like I said, this is a little unorthodox, I know.
Ooh, a penguin.
Yeah, that's where I'm gonna land.
Well, if you're fine, I'll be a panda.
And then I'm going to test it. Took you straight in. Good deal. Awesome.
All right. I'm in.
Could put your password in again real quick and lock for security. Good. And what I'm
I
going
have
to do?
more stuff than
Oh.
you.
You do. Well, it's hidden.
I think I went through one time and was like, ooh, that's available. That's available.
Check
I'm
that
gonna
out.
try this.
Good deal.
I have to agree.
We're going to type in performance. Yeah, you will have to accept that if you scroll, or maybe not have to. We're going to agree.
Okay.
And then if you click on the magnifying glass, sir, then one more time. And then we're going to type in.
I feel like there's, oh, okay, so
There you go.
they're seeing what we're seeing.
Great. So we're getting all in sync. And then click on this magnifying glass. Yep. And then this is for a different thing. And then performance matters.
What's the grade?
So what's exciting is that normally if I'm in a training, that takes 20 minutes. So y'all are pretty high speed. So this will go pretty quick, I would believe. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and take a guided tour of it. And one other thing too, Betty, did we give them the little crib sheet or so? We have a little crib sheet that will walk you through the landmarks, but what I'm going to do is that as we start our journey into it, what you've logged into is Performance Matters, and what you're seeing is basically what somebody at a district or a school level would see if they're in administration. This view is basically what we call the administrative dashboard, and what it's designed to do is just provide some real basic analytics real quick on just some demographic information. Now, with that said, it's pretty neat. It's not the most powerful part of the application by any stretch. But one of the things that has been noted by a lot of administrators is that you'll notice there's a place where we can search for students. We'll investigate that in a little bit. But then to the right, there's an absence rate, percentage of students. And actually, this is pretty good data just to take a look at, very visually, where it's all of a sudden you can see, in this particular case, that there's spikes in, usually around, strangely enough, holidays, things of that nature. Although every once in a while, depending on your school view, because right now we're looking at a district view, if I was a principal or a school administrator, I would actually be seeing my school. So for example, one administrator came to us and they said, hey, look, we had a spike into 7th grade absences. And so the whole concept, in a way, behind Performance Matters is to also kind of ensure that in Performance Matters, it starts you to ask questions on the data. Like, it's not so much to always give you the silver bullet. Kids are not numbers, but with that said, I think it's also very, very important just to kind of be able to start asking those questions. And so they started asking, why were so many 7th graders absent on that day? And they've not gotten back to me necessarily on that answer, but with that, you see the idea, right?
Is this our actual data?
What you're seeing is the actual data. It looks like you may be in a demo site. Okay, so she's going to
Yeah, that
switch.
looks different.
She's actually in a demo site at this particular point. We're going to switch over to the site, and then we're going to enter something known as demo mode. But this is actually the data. A little bit about the data. The data comes over nightly from Skyward and a couple of other applications. So every night that goes through and it refreshes, and it's not quite real time, but it's pretty close. So, and as Betty logs in.
Middle school is so variable.
So now we're in Lake County site, so it will look a little bit more like yours did. There's some other demographic information that it will provide you. Over here on the left, there's school enrollment, the percentage of students. And so it just gives you a quick snapshot right now of where you're at. And so again, it allows you to spot trends. And this is actually a lot of data that gets requested quite a bit from a data shop, and so it's just easy for it to present it to you there. However, if I scroll down on the left-hand side, it's nice demographic information. On the right-hand side, I actually think there's some actionable information or data that's presented, which is discipline rates. So at this particular point, what it's allowing you to do is it's allowing you to see the discipline rates for the months and also kind of compare and contrast to see if you see any patterns real quick, because I think that is very, very important. And as you can see, because again, at the district view, I'm seeing pre-K through 12th. If I was looking at a school and let's say a junior high, I would just see 6th, 7th, and 8th, or a middle school, I'm sorry, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And the other part that's neat is Betty's highlighting here, is that if you hover, because some of this data, you know, kind of, you see all this graphs, it kind of sort of washes together. If you hover over one of the grades, then it will basically give you the snapshot of exactly what's going on, including the count, which I think is pretty neat. Now, one thing I'm going to check real fast is I'm going to confirm with Betty we're in demo mode. Okay, so let's make sure we're in demo mode real quick, because we're going to go ahead and go a little bit deeper. You good?
Now I have to log back out.
No, demo mode. I'm sorry.
Oh, demo mode.
Yes, demo mode. So what demo mode is going to do for a second, no, it's fine. What demo mode is going to do for a second is that the information you're going to see is our actual data. However, we wanted to make sure that we were in demo mode because what it's going to do is it's going to hash out student names. So we're going to look at data, but you'll never really be able to tell who anybody is or anything like that. And that is super important. Now you'll notice we're going to kind of go top to bottom, left to right, because it's kind of an easy way to navigate. And you'll notice that right now, that dashboard is the school overview. But if I look at the next option, there's something for news and assignments, which, to be honest with you, is a feature we probably won't use much. But if we wanted to say, hey, an assessment was available, or FSA scores are in, or something like that, we could. But usually you would send an email out or something like that. So that feature usually gets tucked away. Shared reports can be very, very valuable. And this is the process that we're in now, where I'm going to show you we're able to build reports, really, really powerful reports easily. But the most important thing is that we want to take a burden off of teachers where we don't want them to have to be borderline data scientists to get this data out. That was one of the big causes for one of the reasons why we wanted to bring in Performance Matters. And so in that kind of cause, what we've done is that there's the ability in Performance Matters for us to start designing reports, and then we push them out to the teachers to where they just click a button and that report comes up just the way it was engineered. And that's important too, because I hate to say it, for teachers, it's kind of a burden to have to sit there and go click here, click here, click here, click here. We want them to just be able to click twice. And we also want to make sure that the report is built to spec, that there wasn't a step missed or something like that, and that we're looking at data and trying to take action on data that's not really what we're trying to address. And so that's going to be a neat feature that will emerge pretty shortly. And then the next one is going to be schools. And as you can see, I know I'm in demo mode because now all of a sudden these school names won't make any sense. You might be able to figure some of these out. It's kind of like a word search or something like that. But with that said, what we have at the district level is the ability to actually look at different schools. And what these schools do is they give us a snapshot. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick a school real fast. And then you'll notice a new tab popped up, which is teachers. And so what this is going to do is that administrators have been in love with this because this, at a snapshot, gives you kind of a demographic breakdown of, all the time as a teacher, I would go, hey, listen, I think I have quite a few ESE students. And you'd have to pull data, and then you'd have to compare with everybody, and that was a lot of work. Right now, administrators with that one click can go in, and they can actually see the breakdown. Let's take a look. So what we have here is a listing of the teachers. And as the teachers are listed here, you'll notice that it says all, which is how many students they have. That's how many students that are actually scheduled in their class. So as you can imagine, if you're a PE teacher, well, a lot of times if you're a PE teacher in an elementary school, you get every kid, so you're going to see pretty much the whole population. But on other situations, this is a high school in this particular case, you see the normal load. Right next to it, you will see a little what they call pill. And what this is that this is basically giving you an analytic snapshot of how many ESE students you have. And so real quick, as an administrator, I can go through here and I can see, okay, let me see how this is all balanced out. Let me see how this works. ELL, you'll notice that. EWS, we'll put a pin in that and come back to it in a little bit because this is a pretty neat feature. And it stands for Early Warning System, a little different than the early warning system that we've talked about, kind of an automated way in almost real time to be able to know, does a kid have a D or an F now? A lot of times early warning systems are done sort of so after the fact that you're almost doing what I hate to use the word is almost like a post-mortem on the grade. And what I mean by that is that the grade has already posted, it's already happened, and the chance to kind of sort of intervene or potentially take some action might already be gone. This EWS is pretty sensitive at this point, but it's actually going into the grade book every night and looking to see does the kid have a D and an F right now. And what is their absence? Have they hit a particular attendance threshold or discipline threshold? And then, of course, you see 504 students. We're going to pick any teacher. And so right now, you saw the administrative view. And administrators also have the ability to actually go in and dig into this. But as a teacher, this is the view that a teacher would see. So what I see instantly is I've got the option to filter by course, so I can see all my classes, or I can pick one class. And when I pick on one class, what happens is these cards basically reshuffle. Each one of these cards, I know it's a little hard to see right now, but you probably won't see on your computer, is that they're hashed out. Those are individual students. And so what this is a gateway to the student detail. And what you'll notice is that in this particular English 3 class, there are 18 students. In these 18 students, there is one ESE student. If I wanted to see who that 1 or 2 or 5 ESE students was, all I would do is click on that little pill, and it would isolate that student. So again, for teachers very quickly who are just trying to get a list of who are those ESE students, right? I need to see them real quick. Then that's a way to be able to do that. Yes?
Okay, so once I've clicked on somebody, how do I get back out of that?
Good question.
I can't figure that out.
So it probably will have opened a tab in front of it.
Oh, I see. I see.
And so it's kind of a tabbed approach, so every
Got
time
it.
you open a student.
Thank
So
you.
good question. Jumping ahead, honor student. But yeah, still, that's good. Fair
It
enough.
wasn't highlighted. I couldn't
I
just go
gotcha.
back. New
I
tab,
gotcha.
new tab. Got it.
Hey, crowd, there's always one. So, fair enough. All right. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. And what it does is it basically toggles on and off. And if I wanted to go ahead and get rid of that one class, I wanted to see my entire student population again, I could click that little X and it would take me back to, in this case, all 118 of my students. Now, with that said, this is pretty neat. And if you scroll down for a second, you'll see all those students. But if I scroll back up, or if I just pick a student for a second, it does have to be in the blue bar. That is one trick for those playing along at home, is that if it is not in the if it's not in the blue bar, sometimes the program will freak out a little bit. You just have to hit that blue bar. It's one of the interesting peculiarities. So this is the student detail report. And so if you're a teacher, I want you to imagine this for a second. Like, I got all these questions because I've looked at kind of sort of these overall demographics, and I clicked in, and now I want to see one of these students. One of these students actually triggered the early warning system. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, that EWS. And so, again, all of this is hashed out, but what's really, really cool about this is that this provides a lot of really, really good information. A lot of teachers have started using this as kind of sort of where they operate out when they're doing research on students. Because now, if you'll notice, I get like gender, race, all that stuff. Over to the right-hand side, I get the contact info. And a lot of teachers, too, one of the things that I've heard is happening at schools is guidance counselors are using this as kind of like the conference screen. So when parents come in for a conference, this is going to tell you a lot of that information that they really feel like they need to know in a parent conference situation. So let's take a look. So the first thing I see over here to the left-hand side is the schedule. And over here to the right, what I get is I get a snapshot of that individual student's attendance. And again, it wasn't hard to get. It was basically just look and then click. And then I get their discipline as well. And so, again, if you had a parent conference type situation, these are a lot of the things we talk about. If I've ever been in, I've been in quite a few parent conferences in my life. It's let's go around the room and talk about, I'm the English teacher, I'm the math teacher, I'm the social studies teacher, schedule check. Let's talk about the student's attendance. Let's talk about the discipline, because those do have impacts. And then over on the right-hand side, you see these almost real-time, just like one day off, real-time early warning indicators. And what it does is that the thresholds that have been sort of set by Katie Pearson's teams, it basically says, hey, listen, this student has, in this particular case, course failures. HST course failures are course failures in high-stakes testing subjects. So again, you want to watch those because of the assessment requirements there. And then you also see a truancy rate, in this case, that quarter 3 absences are greater than 10%. And what it's allowing you to do is, as it's building, it's allowing you to take actionable data, and it presents that data very, very easily to the teacher so they can start having conversations, very, very easily to the administration, guidance counselor teams. And so for the most part, this is a pretty neat screen. The next screen that we'll take a look at as we go back up is there was one other thing too. Real-time grades, almost. Like I said, what's happening is that this will give you a snapshot of the grades that are going on with that student, minus, maybe I say real time almost, I mean 1 day behind. Every night they ship from the actual grade book for quarter 3. Quarter 1 or term 1, term 2, semester 1, all those are sort of sealed. But the latest, the last quarter, it's basically doing it in real time, which is pretty cool. All right, so if I scroll up, teachers have loved that feature for the most part when we've done the trainings. However, test results has been another one, because this was one of the first things that I heard whenever we were doing I talked with a lot of folks when I first got here in May, and then of course later on when school actually joined in, is how can I get a hold of my assessment data easily? We're going to look at a couple of different ways. But if I'm a teacher, if I click on state, what happens is I get this great view of the student's test history. And so the view is basically color-coded in a way that I can say, okay, so green is going to be level 3. Red, you can guess, is kind of level 1. Level 2 is yellow. And then there is a green and a blue and a black, I always forget, for level 4s and level 5s. And the neat part about this for teachers is you can see that the history is pretty exhaustive. We're shipping as much of it as we reasonably can at this point. And if I click on this cool little plus button, what happens is that it actually goes into the different sub-test or the sub-test components. And it actually goes in and it gives me a breakdown. So what I can see at a very, very glance on last year's assessments, I'm going to tell you, we'll have a lot of folks clamoring for us to get the FSA in because they love running to this tool. Because what it tells me is that it tells me, okay, in a class level or even at a student level, where is it that I could help this student? Where can I target that assistance and not spend time on what they've kind of got wired and what they've mastered, but the parts that they need still? And again, we probably did that if you're a teacher, instead of making it this kind of sort of crazy, like pull this report, go into Excel, pivot table this. It was about 3 clicks, 4 clicks. And so, again, the teachers have been very, very thrilled with this view. Any questions to this point? It is really, really cool. I will tell you this, is that we'll talk about this in a little bit. What's great about this analytic tool is it's great for the state assessments. What we really are looking to do is something for the local assessments as well. And that's kind of our phase 2, which I'll show you what sort of a prototype of what that will look like, because that is in implementation. To this end, I will say this. Lake County was able to very agilely implement this. I think it was purchased in August 27th at that board meeting. The teams here in Lake County, and the instructional teams, the IT teams, were so adept, they basically were training it like for production by December, which I've done a couple of these type of implementations. It's usually a 5 or 6 month project, and they were able to get it in, and it's because everybody pulled together because they saw the value of this.
May I ask a question since you
course.
asked?
Sure.
When you said that there are points where it kicks in the early warning, what does that look like? Like, who is notified? In other words, does that pop up separately?
Yeah, it shows up in that teacher view, and then there are some reports that the teams that work with early warning systems
Simultaneously, it's going out.
can pull. Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the great things about it is connectively inside, nobody's waiting on anything, and it does sort of push data to you. We have been working with those teams, and so that report, and one thing that I do want to bring up too, which is kind of important, it even is so connected on the inside that when a student shows up from like another school, that data follows them, so there's no real lag. And then later on, whenever we get students from other districts, now the early warning system may fill in for, may take a little bit of time for them to trip some of those because they haven't gotten a referral or attendance here. But the neat part about it is that that data comes over the next night. And so this is a very, very, I think a decent upgrade from where we were before, where we were waiting on maybe that data to come over, and also just hard to pull out a little bit.
But if I'm a teacher, and I don't look at my students every single day because I
Right.
pretty much know them,
Right.
is there something that signal, do I have to hit on that student to realize that they're at
Yeah,
risk?
it's a great question. I think one of the things that in the early warning system process as is that process was unbelievably cumbersome. And what I mean by that is that people were pulling spreadsheets and doing all this kind of crazy pivot table stuff. And by the time they got the data out to schools, it was a couple of weeks old in some cases. And that's just because the data was just so hard to get a hold of. Part of the idea of bringing this in, because it's more real time, is there. And so I think what's happened is that the teams that are working with early warning systems are kind of getting to grips with what that means to be in real time, because they're so used to have to waiting a couple of weeks. So right now, the answer is that there are reports that are going out to people, and I think part of the message is the early warning system. We kind of did the testing part first, the assessment part, and the demographic part. We're sort of in the late early warning system phase, but I think you will see that those notifications will be made sure they get out to guidance counselors and they can start working it as soon as possible.
What does
But
this
I-
look like from accountability?
Yep. But I think to answer his question, it appears in the teacher's dashboard when it
Yes.
triggers it. So they're not having to go in on that first screen that you saw. There was alert there that said EWS. The student pops up and it tells them in which area they've triggered an early
As
warning.
Yes,
when
they sign
Oh,
up.
yeah.
That's what I was
When they log
asking.
Oh, yeah, I'm
That's
sorry.
what I was asking.
Yes.
I didn't
I
realize
overshot
that.
again.
Yeah.
My bad.
No. But then it's also going to the district, right?
Correct.
And so then what does that connectivity look like? Is someone calling the teacher?
I think those processes are now just currently being, because again, they hadn't had a real-time system at any point. I think those processes are now getting worked out with
Okay,
what to do in that.
Okay.
And there is one note too, is there is a formal early warning system as prescribed by the state, which this hits most of the tick marks on. So we're kind of sort of having to do a little bit of process revision because the data system's gotten better.
Yeah, I know on the attendance side, that was one of the first triggers that really caught everyone's attention. Teachers were seeing it, and oh my goodness, we have a lot of absences. And so I know that they met with student services, and that maybe 2 weeks ago, student services pushed out some clarification about here's the steps. When it triggers the first one, here's what you do, and it's a step-by-step guide for teachers as to how we're going to handle attendance, so that it's not something that we just go, oh, there's a problem and it's not being addressed. So there are some expectations in terms of accountability, in terms of when it's at 3 absences, this happens, at 5 absences, this happens.
Yep.
If that
But
helps. So.
I think this is the most exciting component for me, because I've been on the board where we get to the end of the year, we take the finals, and then we realize that we didn't do so well. That this is exciting to me.
It's been very cool. So oh, yes.
So what's
Well,
the
and
expectation for a teacher, how often you log in to this to take a look? I mean, with Skyward, obviously, you're logging in every day to do your attendance. This is an extra
Another
program,
step.
another
Sure.
program. So you have to deliberately make this attempt to go look and see if any students are triggering early warning signs, right?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think as far as like a total like early warning system, that's still kind of in the proto phase.
Right.
But as far as the adoption goes, like I don't think there's necessarily been, unless somebody else in instructional would say otherwise, an expectation. We wanted to provide this tool and resource just because so many people were asking us for it. Like it was one of the number one things that when I would go out into a classroom is that we want to see this data. And whenever, it's been the neatest project in the fact that whenever you go into training, sometimes it's kind of like, oh, it's another thing. Like the faculties have actually been very, very receptive at the end of it. And we've had all kinds of cases where people have been using it and then coming back to Betty, who's been one of the primary trainers and actually been really spearheading a lot of the work. But I guess what I was going to say is that I don't believe that there is like a hard expectation on it. It's provided as a resource for teachers. However, when we talk about phase 2, a lot more will be looking at it as those local assessments fall in. So
Yeah, I think there's some benefit there, and also I think when you're looking at what can be done for K2, you know, when you don't have that state assessment data.
it's very true.
So, I mean, obviously, I'd then be going to iReady to pull my report to see how my class is done. Is there an integration piece that makes that super user-friendly here?
We did, and we're going to show you that in a second. The
Okay.
iReady scores, iReady's kind of interesting because iReady likes hanging on to their stuff. That's fair.
Okay.
But with that said, we are basically importing iReady scores into Performance Matters, so you can analyze it with all these demographic factors and things like that. And the real thrill will be when like things like the LSA get in there, and we'll show you what that future will look like fairly shortly. But yeah, let's go ahead and go to that now if you'd like.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I have a question.
sure.
Oh, go ahead, Dr.
Okay. So I pulled up the same school you did, and I'm looking at a teacher that I know, and out of 139 students, 123 have early warning systems.
It's true.
And that's not uncommon as I'm looking. So if you prioritize everybody, you're prioritizing nobody.
True story.
So that was my piggyback question, if I can add to that. My
I got a
question was
piggyback on
gonna be,
piggyback.
Is could there be a way, or is there in the working where if you have, so attendance, let's talk about attendance, right? So kids are sick. This has been a really bad flu season for children.
Of course.
So kids have more attendance issues. So is there an adjustment that's made when they meet maybe 2 of the early warning signs as opposed to just attendance? Because you've got kids that
Yeah.
are not. that
Or
are
levels of
doing well.
attendance.
Sure.
Levels
Right.
of attendance. It's something
Or
that
a
would trigger,
breakout of some sort.
okay, this one's a step up.
Sure.
This one's got 2 early warning signs.
So
This one's-
we saw a lot of that, and actually in the early conversations about the early warning system is the sensitivity piece. And so basically what we were looking at, especially when you look at the beginning of a quarter, if I miss 1 out of 2 days, then I have a 50% absence rate, which is not necessarily there. However, over time, that will develop out too. We've had a lot of conversations, and I think it's still an evolving, because like I said, the early warning system is a little still prototype. But I think one of the things about the early warning system that is interesting is that, like, for example, if I hit the attendance threshold in first quarter or second quarter, then it sticks. And so what you see by the end of the year is you see kind of almost like cumulative effect of students that are like still counting in the first quarter. And it still may be a concern. Like, this is the trick that we haven't been able to kind of sort of program the language around, as far as like, I mean, that kid that missed all those things and all those days in the first quarter still may be a concern as far as the early warning system, or may not, because they may have corrected in second and third. And so we're trying to figure out like ways to improve the logic and how it's calculating that. I think it will take some time. However, one of the things that is funny is that we had several, because the administrators had the same conversation whenever we went into some of the early trainings. They were like, oh my gosh, because they saw the same thing. And at first they would kind of be like, okay, yeah, this is way oversensitive. But then they'd start digging. And when they started digging, they started going, but this kid really does have an attendance concern here or a discipline concern here. And you got to remember the thresholds on some of these. The attendance one is pretty sensitive, but it's that, are you failing a class now? And so we started to have those conversations. Do you want to know or not want to know? Because that's really kind of what you're talking about. And right now they're still like on that, especially the grade book piece, because what it means is one kid has an F in one course or a D or an F in one course. And sometimes just as kids transition through the quarter and kind of go from like assignment to assignment, that happens, right? And so when they started digging in, they were kind of like, we need to really think about turning this too far back, because the concern is that you're not looking at anything, but the concern is also too, and I'll show you how we have some reports that I think will refine this a little bit. We just felt like it was kind of like almost like a dashboard indicator of like something's up, and then click and take a look. But there's not a hard, like the early warning systems that have been put in place instructionally as far as the things that are required by the state, and those processes are still being handled through reports and things of that nature. This is basically just a heads up to the teachers something is going on with the student's attendance, discipline, or grades. And it did become a question of when is real time. It's kind of one of the pains of being in real time. In the past, when it was kind of lagging data maybe a little bit, it didn't hit you the same way. And now that you're seeing a kid pops into early warning system because I got a D right now, but tomorrow I don't have a D. So I pop out of the early warning system, and it's constantly evolving. It does make it a little bit tricky. So we'll work on logic to try to refine it. It's just sensitive at this point. We just couldn't, whenever we talk to administrators, actually say, hey, this is where it needs to be cut. When I said attendance, they were like, well, no. And then when I said discipline, they were like, well, no. And then grades. We'll continue to have those conversations.
Well, I think there's something to be said for an early warning sign that is no longer still current or valid, that it's in the past and it's done, you know, such as, okay, so I'll confess I pulled up my own daughter so I understand the data I'm looking at.
Always the first.
And quarter two, there it is, early warning sign for attendance because we had the flu running through our house.
Most of mine have it too.
Yeah,
Sure.
and you know, I'm looking at the grades and the FSA scores. I say that's not an early warning indicator. But yet, you know, when I've got, let's say I'm a middle school teacher, I'm looking at 100-something kids, and how do I
daunting.
sort through that?
Right.
You know.
Yeah. That's
And
what
I think what we'll show you when we show you the next component is kind of how you sort through that, because I
Okay.
do agree with you, like the quarter one, quarter two stuff can get a little bit tricky, and that may be something that we take back. The concern became, if I'm just to get a little more technical about it, is when you had quarter 1, 2, and 3, then all of a sudden if you take quarter 2 and quarter 1 away, and that's what they're triggering, their attendance is their big deal, then they may not be identified, if you get what I'm saying, as one of those people who has multiple indicators. So it is a little bit tricky in the
Yeah.
logic, but there may be a way.
You'll
There may
figure
be
it
a way.
out.
And couldn't the discussion then be too, because if it's quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, but they still got straight A's, I don't know, that could be an instructional discussion where we have to.
It would seem to me that if we're not careful, the early warning signs can
Get
become
ignored.
so much that you end up discounting them,
Yeah,
just like we're
they
having
would
this
be-
conversation, that it seems like the number one early warning sign is they're not passing their test. I mean, their assessments,
True.
to me.
True.
That you could miss multiple days because of the flu and still have an A. Is, do you rate early warning? I say no, to me.
Right.
And
that
they
may
do
be-
automatically rate them that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, it's looking at each one of those indicators individually, which is the attendance, discipline, and grades. And so the question would be is, can performance matters evolve to the point where it's actually taking a look and saying, yeah, you haven't, for the teacher's consumption or the administrator's consumption, yeah, you missed everything, you missed a couple of days in the second quarter, it knocked you over the threshold. However, you got an A, you got whatever. I think that'll be a question to performance matters to see how the logic evolves in it. However, the one thing that is great is these kind of conversations have been happening everywhere at every school, and I think it's made them look at the data. And I love it when people I love the challenge and the back and forth of data. It's actually more my background than the instructional technology part, and it's cool because you start to ask those questions, right? And so now school administrative teams are starting to ask those questions of us, and I think it means because now that the data is transparent, they can see it, and I think that's been honestly a little bit of a
Right.
victory.
But as a data person, like, I would look at this and go, oh, that's useless. Like, fast.
I think you could, but again, I keep going back to the fact that in each early warning system indicator, there is a story. It's not just flagging a kid for no reason.
Right, but I'm not gonna, as a
But-
teacher, like, I used to have 160 kids and 70 or whatever.
Yeah, I
And,
remember those days too.
I never did.
and I wouldn't go through 90% of my kids.
No, and I think the next,
Because that's what that number is a rough.
well, and I think the next part that we show will give you a little more clarity of how
Okay.
that would be identified. because I do think that's a good point. So, all right. So with that said, let's get to one of my favorite parts, which is the reports. And we've been out of it, so it may ask you to log in the portal again. If it does, no problem. But basically, we go to reports and baseball card report. This is where you may get some of those answers to things that you're looking a little more specifically for. And if you get this, it's no big deal. You just click unlock and put your password in again.
I don't see it either.
Hold on, I'm closing tabs trying to get
Oh,
myself.
gotcha. Yeah, hold on.
Shared
Shared
reports?
reports.
Oh, shared reports.
No,
okay.
not shared,
Oh.
but at the very... The black bar? Reports?
Oh,
There you go. So there.
Baseball
Yes, sir.
card?
Oh, reports. There it is.
Uh-huh. Baseball card?
And now I'm locked.
Yeah, it may ask you to just put your password in again real
What's
quick.
the password?
Your
My
password.
password?
Don't tell us.
It's, just,
You can tell it now.
Okay.
yeah.
Probably not. So we'll go ahead and say no. All right. So to kind of follow up with like the line that you took, I think one of the things that is important is for us to provide reports to teachers, including these early warning indicators. But the first kind of report that I'm going to look at is the part that actually honestly blew a lot of people away whenever we started demonstrating this in training people, is that as an administrator, to get this data, this assessment data, could be a little bit of a chore. And we wanted to make it a couple of clicks, and we also wanted to make it where we could include things like early warning indicators, iReady results. We wanted to tie all this stuff together. And so what you'll see here is that you'll see the baseball card report, and it's pretty straightforward in how you navigate through it. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see the folders. And the folders are gazillions of assessments that we've moved over from Skyward or the data warehouse. And so if you click on state and local by subject, what it will do is it will open up a whole array of assessments, including EOC data, FSA data, and then also you'll notice if you scroll down too, there's also data like ACT, SAT, the practice SAT. You've got a ton of data available. But we're going to go kind of flat for a second. We're going to study something kind of basic. Now you'll notice you have a district view. And because you have a district view right now, you're looking at, if you scrolled all the way down, you would actually see 44,081 students or so. However, again, if you're at a school, one thing that's important is this is role-based security. So depending on what level you're at, like if you're a school administrator, you're just seeing your kids. If you're a teacher, you're just seeing your kids. And so basically what you've got here is, because we're at the district level, you're going to see all 44,000. But that would not necessarily be the case all the time. What we're going to do is that we're going to click on, over on the left-hand side, FSA ELA. And what you'll notice is there are scores for 4 years that have been put in. And at some particular point, we may go through and fill in more. But you see basically two different levels, the score and the achievement level. And so right here, 17, 18, those are basically retakes at this particular point. So we're not going to necessarily take a look at that. What we're going to do is we're going to click on 16, 17, which was the last year that everybody took the test. And what happens is very quickly, it fills in all the assessment data as far as the scores. And if we wanted to, we could even include the achievement level for it, because sometimes the score doesn't necessarily make sense. And so right now, again, if I'm a teacher, in 2 clicks, I just got a list of every one of my students' FSA score and the achievement level. Now, you can do some pretty powerful things with this. And maybe even, I mean, it's so easy to use, honestly. Like maybe I want the achievement level first, so I can actually just drag and drop and swap the stuff around. So very, very easy to kind of sort of maneuver through. And I'll give you kind of a simple quest, but it's something that happens quite a bit. Okay, so those kids that made level 3s and 4s and 5s, that's good, and I want to pay attention to them. But right now, I want to know who my level 1s and 2s are, okay? So a couple of different options that I've got here. Up at the very, very top, these are things known as swatches. And each one of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not too hard of a coding system. Basically what happens is that when I click on one of the ones that I don't want, that's kind of the trick in this, is that you're clicking on the ones you don't want to see. You'll notice that the little block goes white. And then up in the left-hand side a little bit, where it says apply swatching, what it does is that then it will resort, and it will give me all my level 1s and level 2s. So it does it that quick. And so I think the neat thing about this is again, this would have been a whole lot of work. And the best part about this too is that if we get a little more creative in the report, and I really want to share this out to folks, if I scroll up to the left, or scroll up, to the left there's this cool button that says download, which will download it into Excel, and it'll keep the formatting. But Excel is kind of tricky. The one thing about reports is the second you publish one, they're dead. And a new kid came in, somebody left, whatever. And so what you can also do is there's this really, really great button here called share. And if you go ahead and cut and paste that link in an email to your faculty, it will force them to log in, and it will show them the report that you built exactly. So now what you've just done is that you've kept the teacher from having to build the report. It's just click on this link, sign in, and you have the report. And going back to that early warning indicator thing, early warning indicators are included in that, and I think one of the things that we will see as a strategy is you can build that early warning indicator report the way that you want to, and then just push that out to your faculty, and they can see, okay, these are the things that we're going to pay attention to. So we'll show you that in a little bit. Now, I've got a couple of other options for you.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Do we share at a site base, do we share with every teacher, every student's information?
Oh, great question. So in this particular case, when I get that link, I only see my students.
Okay.
So in this particular case, like, you're not seeing everybody. However, if I was a guidance counselor and I got that link, I would see the entire thing. So the system is smart enough to censor permissions, those role-based permissions, and apply them appropriately. So yeah, so you're not just, in a way, that's where it actually beats, because I mean, I hate to say it, some of the old processes I've seen in other districts haven't necessarily seen it here, is that somebody will send out a big, massive spreadsheet somehow, some way, whether it's printed or whatever, and then you go through all these students that are not yours. This is very tailored.
That would happen with Excel, by the way.
True
right?
story.
What about at
So
a
we
team
shouldn't do
level?
Excel at all.
I'm sorry?
What about when you want collaborative planning at a team level?
Yeah, so a lot of people have been asking in those collaborative situations for adjusted permissions to include different, like, permission sets or so. What I've seen a lot of is that everybody brings their own report, but there's a couple of ways you get around it. Working with folks as that comes up. So
And in this, are our conversions students in here?
we're shipping right now currently every.
But
every
no charters, right? Are they providing you data?
The charters are in there. Whether or not they've been trained or not can be a different situation based on the site. But we basically are shipping every student just because it's the kind of way we're told to do it. So
charter, public, and conversion
Correct.
are all in this data?
correct. Yep, that's the whole data set, the whole data universe.
And who can see, at the district level, we could see a charter, for example, and see how their best practices or how their students are performing?
Show you because again, I love this stuff. The really cool stuff is I got still 11,907 students here, right? So I want to get a little more specific about what it is that I want to look at. Actually, what I'm going to do before I go to the student filter is I'm going to click on this plus button, which is affectionately known as the tiniest button in the whole world. And when I click on that, what will happen is that if I want to add more information, so I want to know current grade, school of enrollment, all I do is click. If I want to add ESE status, ELL, whatever, I click OK. And instantly what it does is it goes in and it fills in that data. So I can make the report more robust, right? And of course, I have the option to go through and I can sort. So with one quick sort, I can get a list by school. And I can see what's going on. Pretty neat. Then, my other favorite button is this Apply Student Filter. And the options here are nearly limitless. Because what I can do is that I can say, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this. I want to go ahead and know every ESE student. Now, I could have done that by filtering and all that, but I still would have had all those yes or no's. But if I click on yes, then what I will have is I will actually have a filter for every ESE student. And now, when it resorts, I'm now down to 2,910 students because now those are just my ESE students, those that have a yes. And you can see that almost anybody really can be trained on this pretty quickly, and the reports that we're seeing are really, really cool. If I go back to Add Student Filter, there's some things that are built in here for specifically for Lake County. Like if I click on geographical for a second, there's school type, there's course, there's class, there's teacher, and there's actually this thing called school cluster, which is their inelegant way of basically, if I click on that, being able to do it by region. And so we can actually go in there and see by region these schools, which is pretty handy, honestly. The early warning indicators. So if you start to think about this for a second, I can start to get very, very specific in my reports, meaning I could say, give me every ESE student right now that is hitting one of the attendance thresholds.
Can you
And so-
save those filters?
And you can save that whenever you send that link to everybody. They've got that. Basically, what people have been doing is they've been keeping like a list of links. And so they have like ESE with absence. They just go on that, click on it, and they're right there. So you sure can. And custom student has got some innovations in it that are pretty important, which is things like the AVID flag, CTE flag, and then if we scroll down to the bottom, something that was incredibly difficult to calculate, would take forever, things like the bottom quartile or learning gains. With just one click, you can actually see who those students are, build those reports. Because if you've ever had to try to keep track of the lower quartile, that's a very slippery number. A kid came in, a kid left. It's constantly reshuffling. Now you can see it. The great thing about that link too is that link, every time you pull it up, it's real-time data. So you had 5 kids come in, they're on that report the night after. And so you're always, by using that link, instead of printing something out that becomes kind of like stale to some extent, you always have the latest look at the data, which I think is super, super
So
important.
as the kids migrate between schools, which is really common, like in my
Yes.
district, it just updates, and it'll update their school. So all of a sudden, they'll be
Correct.
on the roster for the new teacher.
Part of the nightly refreshes is that it automatically gets there the night after, as long as the registration process is complete. So that kind of, again, we're moving so close to that real-time piece. I mean, we're almost like right there, that it is really cool to be able to see that. That way I'm not waiting for 3 months or having to go fish out that student's data separately, because that was never much fun. All right.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Of course.
I believe it's underneath that area there, underneath homeless, and then it says unaccompanied youth flag. What is that?
I'd have to defer to those folks because we shoved a ton of data in, and I might not have looked at that one. True story. So a lot of it, when we met with stakeholders, they would ask, and there is literally, I think it's close to almost like 1,300 data elements or something like that you can kind of sort of mess around with in one form or another. I'd have to ask the folks, the student services folks that are in charge of that. But we did get asked. That was one thing that is important to note. Those custom ones were us customizing the systems to the needs of departments that reached out to ask us. So they would say, hey, we'd really like to know, is it this or that? And then we'd say, sure, no problem. So it's become a very flexible tool.
Why is it called baseball card report?
I like sports because I'm about to show you scoreboard. I don't really, the company just does that.
Just curious.
I think the idea behind baseball card is usually like when you're looking at a baseball card, it gives you all the stats and everything. So, but then scoreboard, it kind of jumps a little bit. Yeah.
So under multiple warnings, it has the 2 indicators, 3 indicators, 4 indicators.
Correct.
That's nice.
And so, on the early warning indicators, just to address that for a second, what you could do is that it would be very easy to go in there and kind of, especially even school to school or at a district level, kind of sort of customize that early warning system report that you think fits best. And where I've seen the early warning system work best is I kind of consider the EWS on the student detail to be like an indicator light, like something's going on. But where I've seen the real work done is when these reports get pushed out, that's when they go, okay, these are the students that we're really concerned about. Let's take a look at them, and pushing that report out allows districts to customize it. Because I do know another district that wants it as sensitive as they can because they have a big process involved the second somebody pops on that. But I agree with you. I have a tendency to agree with you. It washes over me if I see too many. And that ability to kind of customize that report and push it out, because those indicators are there, I think is beneficial.
How are teachers responding? Like, are they getting this? I mean, there's a lot of clicks.
Well, the good news is they're not usually in baseball card as much. They've been loving student detail. And so in the training curve, it's always an interesting trick because you get about 45 minutes to show all this.
Right.
And, of course, you're competing with other things. But they're hooked on I think this is safe to say, they're hooked when they see it on the student detail and that snapshot of their class, because that data has just been more difficult to get a hold of. On the baseball card report, the administrators, we had several administrator trainings, probably 12 or 13 administrator trainings, probably trained close to 250 school leaders. Some of them were like in that CRT position, some of them were administrators, and most of them were ecstatic. I know I go and I talked to other district departments, they're happy. It kind of has the feel of sort of liberating our data a little bit to where people can see it more. I do think it's a concentrated effort. I do think anytime you do an initiative like this, I mean, this is expected to be a multiple year initiative that you enforce and then you reinforce and then you reinforce. So I think we're in month 3 of it, honestly, because we started training in November. But right now, I think the buzz is very, very positive. Very happy with the way the project has progressed thus far.
So years ago, I remember going through the Decision Ed training.
Yes.
And by comparison, this is just light years ahead of that. I mean, it was that program. It was not intuitive at all.
Angry.
Yes. Angry. Are we talking about the participants in the training or the program? Because angry might just describe both. This is a very different experience.
It is a different experience. I will say this: Decision Ed as a product has allowed us to be able to deploy Performance Matters very quickly because that data warehouse that we built to support it. I know that gets a little nerdier. I think Decision Ed was a great first step, to be honest with you. But you're right. This is kind of the realization of what we want, which is a couple clicks.
Yeah.
I do agree with you that I don't know that every teacher is necessarily in there building every report. I think where you're going to see the pop is those administrators building those reports out for people to push them out. But we have some very enterprise. I'm going to tell you, I've talked to some teachers. There's some very enterprising teachers that once they figure out how to click, they're doing incredible stuff. Stuff that just wasn't possible 3 months ago. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. One last thing I'll show you, and then I'm done. Scoreboard, because I teased it, and then I got to show you the local assessment thing that is coming. So 2 more things. I didn't actually say it right. Reports. If you click on that, there will be an option for scoreboard. It might ask you to log in again because I'm talking too long and it's timing out. The reason it does time out, though, I think is important, is there is a metric ton of student data in here. And to be honest with you, during a lunch hour or anything like that, we don't want it to be unlocked. So if sometimes the security gets a little annoying, it is done in the design of making sure our student data stays safe. So the scoreboard almost looks the same. On the left-hand side, I've got all kinds of neat stuff, which is the same stuff I had before. The assessment data. Oh, something else, too, that I'll talk about just for a second is we have a graduation report that's built in here, too. So you can actually start tracking whether students are got all their credits, met all their assessments, and things of that nature. But for scoreboard, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do almost the same thing. I'm going to go back to state, local by subject. And I'm going to pick on the FSA ELA. And I'm going to pick on 2 years here, I guess. And so I'm going to pick on 16, 17. And you'll notice there's a little plus button there. So I'm going to click on that. And you'll notice it does something different. I'll explain that in a second. And then I'm going to click on 17, 18. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's 15, 16. Let's do that instead. And then we're going to reorder it because I did it out of order. Now, you're probably wondering what you're looking at for a second. Well, what you're looking at is, and then it doesn't make as much sense necessarily to the audience because everything's hashed out, is this is a listing by region of schools. And again, that kind of code of level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 is the same as it was, right? And what I'm seeing is that I'm actually seeing how the FSA scores for 2 years broke down by level, by school, by region, and by district. And again, I did that kind of analysis super quick, right? Few clicks, and then I'm there. And what's neat about this is that I can actually drill down for a second. So let's go back to the high school that we went to. And so when I click on that, what happens is that it is a little unrecognizable, but then there is a listing of the teachers, right? So for an administrator, this is a great tool to take a look. Now, one thing that was important that we had to remind administrators, they're like, well, I don't know about this teacher. What are they doing? I'm like, these are all last year's scores, right? So this is not what they've done. This is the reality that is in front of them, right? Because all of this data is, well, one back, right? But with that said, what I can see is that I can click there, and then I can actually see it break down by class. And so what's been interesting for teachers or even administrators is they go, wow, you always kind of think, but when the data is not transparent, it's hard to make this assumption. Like, you always kind of think, wow, like I feel like I have a lot of level 1s and level 2s. Well, this may prove it or disprove it very quickly, right? Which is that in a couple of clicks, you're able to see there are a lot of level 1s and level 2s. And so even in late scheduling processes, sometimes this is used to kind of level things out a little bit. And it's even neater than that because if I click one more time on this little triangle for one of the classes, it will give me a list of the actual students. And so, again, with just a few clicks, I'm able to really drill down and see what's going on. Now, again, I keep going back to the permissions. If I'm a teacher, I just see my classes, right? And if I'm an administrator, I see everybody, right? And if I'm in the district, I can see everybody. But with that said, this data is really, really good and easy to get a hold of. And the neatest feature in this is that, because we don't have time all the time, is that I actually have the option to do demographic comparisons fairly quick. So I can add a student filter, but go ahead and get rid of one of those years. Get rid of 15, 16, if you would. And then what I want to do is I want to look at the key demographic groups. So there's that plus button. No, if you could get rid of that, if you would. We're going to go one step further. There's this plus button, but then there's also this dot, dot, dot button. And with one click, what I can do is when I click on that, I can add and compare different subgroups. So if I want to see by gender, or I just want to see everything, what I did with one click is that now I'm looking at that by gender. I'm looking at that by ethnicity. If I keep scrolling over, I will see it by, in this particular case, that field is kind of hidden. It's the economically disadvantaged field. But ELL, you get what I'm saying, right? With just one click, I'm able to go in there and do those comparisons by subgroups. So again, very, very powerful tool to be able to address all that stuff quickly. All right. One last.
Again, but
Oh, yeah.
with that knowledge, what is the action?
Comes great responsibility.
Right.
I mean, I've heard that once or twice. This is where I get to be the computer guy and go, I don't know. No. I mean, I think that is the question as this tool emerges, which is what are the next steps, because the data is so readily available now. So.
Yeah, we do have, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but I know that this data has really led to a lot of data conversations. So I don't know if any of y'all want to kind of address how that's happening in the conversations with the data meetings. I know Dr. Weiskopf looks like she's really anxious to answer that question, so you'll need to come to the mic.
So I think one of the first steps was that we had to know. So teachers have been really anxious to get a system that allows them to be able to access the data. And then, of course, it leads to a lot of different discussions and actions. So, for example, if I look at, if I can go into Unify or Performance Matters and pull down all the kids who have not had an acceleration course yet, because I could pull that by CTE course or pull that by test, it allows me to target kids, whereas right now we're pulling every kid, like the guidance counselor's going through and literally going through every kid's record, and so that's action. So, and we've had to pull those reports, and it takes a long time, and this is way easier. If I want to pull my lower quartile and start tutoring, so for instance, one of the ways that I've seen it used is that I pull my lower quartile, and they get the first invites to tutoring, because oftentimes you think about in schools that have tutoring, the kids who come are the kids that don't need it, because they're the kids who, so I start looking at how many kids do I need to put in tutoring? Can I get a bus? Can I get, it's fast. So it starts those conversations really quickly. They get the first invite, so maybe everybody else gets a second invite when I don't fill up the spaces. So that's a way to use it very quickly. It helps me know that if I have classes that are unequal, like when you mentioned that I've got this many males and females or ESE students, or it helps me make courses or make classes that are more equally distributed. And once I know by that very first report that you saw, how many ESE kids, I think the early warning systems, one of the things that it is very sensitive, so everything is flagged, right? So I understand what you were saying about a lot of data means it's hard to target, but, I would recommend that we do something like if your absentee rate is high and you have a D or an F, then that's an early warning system, right? Then you flag. So that if we can get those, we'll have to ask Performance Matters if they can bundle that. That's typically how early warning systems work. If you have a high discipline and you add a high discipline rate in there, then of course, they get flagged. I think people are using it when we have LSA data in there, which is, we can't show you because we don't have any in there, but it will break down the questions by standard, by skill. It'll tell you, you can be able to sort kids who missed certain questions to be able to help with small groups. It's got tons of possibilities in terms of how to use it. Does that help?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Anything else while I'm up here?
I'm good.
The homeless piece, the one that came underneath it was like unaccompanied children, I think, was unaccompanied student.
Youth, it said.
Youth, I think, so it's a homeless delineation, so we have to report it that way. Amy, do you know, and I think it's kids who maybe their parents aren't here, and so that's what I think it is. I think it's like, I live with my aunt, or I live with my uncle, or I live with my.
They might not have true legal guardians.
Yeah, but there's no parent over them. I think it's how that particular student.
So, one of the things that I, like, when I design scientific essays, when I that's my job, is that I have to be careful to not forget to look at the experiment. Like, I can't just look at the data, because inevitably, some things happened and everything has turned into like a different color, or something bizarre has happened. And therefore, my data makes no sense, but if I look at my assay, my experiment, I can go, oh, well, okay, this. So are we actually looking at the children still? Like, because sometimes that bottom quartile, there could be that kid who just has anxiety on test taking. And I don't know that they necessarily need math tutoring. So
Right,
are we
yeah,
allowing
sure.
the teachers to still?
Absolutely, just like when you guys looked at your own kids and they were early warnings, I promise you, they're not, you know what I mean, they're like, I'm not worried about that one, she had the flu. I mean, so yeah, we're totally, and I think what Dwayne was saying is that you can go in, when I look at kids specifically, I can see that the early warning system might be grades, it's not attendance, so we definitely still look at kids. I mean, again, that's a really far stretch from where we are, because we couldn't even look at the data. So, I mean, we haven't ever had data that's this readily accessible to be able to make decisions around. So we still look at kids, but we do have to look at, we're not looking at 14 different systems. Because before we had to go into this report and into this, we had to go into this, and now this puts everything in one place. So teachers love this because it does give them a quick shot. And if you're a high school teacher and you have 160 students, it's hard to keep track of everybody, right? Or to know who to target or who to make the phone call to. I mean, I pretty much know when I'm in class who's maybe not there, but I might want to know if they're struggling in other courses, or this starts my conversations in collaborative planning time to say, hey, is anybody else having trouble with so-and-so? And if you're not, what's working in your class? Because they're not doing so well in my class, you know?
Right. I could definitely see this helping the kids who would slip through the cracks too.
Well, I even think that student piece is so important, because I know for us, when I'm teaching even at the collegiate level, it doesn't start with me looking at data. It starts with me saying, hey, Miss K, how's so-and-so doing in your class? Are you seeing a concern? And then it's like, yeah, I'm having this concern. Oh, I'm having this concern. And then we kind of look at their grades and look at what their attendance are. So I think it actually starts at the teacher level, where they're seeing these signs in their classroom, and then let's pull and look at what they've done in the past. And it's a good way to.
Does it put additional pressure on the teacher to get grades in quicker?
No, because this isn't seen by parents, so it doesn't necessarily do that. I mean, it wouldn't.
But you need the grade in order for it to populate and recalculate the data, right?
It only has semester grades.
Well, it does do live grades in the current quarter, so it is.
Yeah,
putting
it
that
will
data.
do live grades for early warning systems, but it's not necessarily, like their testing, all that stuff will still be there. Like it doesn't do their tests, it'll do our district assessments, so I don't know that I don't know that it'll drive that, because really, I think
Skyward already.
I think
drives that.
Skyward kind of drives that, and more the parents, wanting to see
I
it,
think-
and kids wanting to see it,
Yeah.
drives the input of date.
I guess the question is, though, is there enough drive? Because despite Skyward and despite the urgency from parents and students checking their grades, still you sometimes go like weeks or a month without grades being input in a class going, I have no idea how you're doing.
Yeah,
Until you
so-
get to that progress report time when the teacher puts them all in that night, or the report card. So
My
how
son
do we
got
combat that?
detention
That's a
for
whole other conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if that's Dwayne's
but
performance
that's where
matters
he's onto something
presentation,
there.
but, so I will tell you that that's all bargained.
Right. But the rule, I think, in there is
There's
5 days. You've got
there's
5 days
parameters
to
in
put it
there.
in. So the question is, how do we enforce that?
That would be the school administrator.
Mhm.
Yeah. But they never know until somebody complains, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Because they're trying to keep track of. But again, so one of the things that leaders do now is they can see that, right? So now they have a way to actually look at
That's right.
they can look at the, what's the first report we looked at, dashboard?
The student detail or teacher detail.
They can go to
Yeah.
teacher detail and then kind of see some of that. Just say, hey, why aren't, it allows them to do it too. As a leader, it was an amazing, powerful piece for me. And now as a district leader as well, it has been for several years, so. Anything else?
Why isn't the LSA data in?
Well, actually, that's our next part.
Well, we
The
don't
LSA
have any,
data.
I think, yeah, he's gonna show you, we don't have any new LSA data because we haven't done any,
We only did them in December.
but we
So-
didn't have, we weren't live with this
Yeah,
yet.
so
We-
the good news is like the aggregates, like the total scores are in there. However, what most people are wanting is they want to be able to break it down by standard. And so we do have that product Eduphoria that they're currently administered in. But part of what we're looking to do is we're looking to transition to Performance Matters for the 18-19 school year. And I was going to show you a quick snapshot. This is a demo site, so since we don't have any LSA data. But what is amazing is that that project kicked off about 2 weeks ago. And Angel from Assessment, I think, has already built like 39 of the assessments out already. So we're making a pretty rapid push to it. We're going to technically test it to make sure it works. Probably before people leave is like sample test or something like that, just to make sure the platform works. But the analytics, I think once we take FSA data, early warning indicators, all this other demographic data, and then also introduce the LSA data, which I'll show you on this screen. You won't see something similar on this screen since this is kind of a demonstration site. But if we scroll down to the bottom, what happens is if we were giving an LSA data, there will be this option underneath something known as test analysis. And so what this will do for teachers is that this will give them, based on whatever assessment we give, like the LSA, a snapshot on the left-hand side where it says attributes. Those are actually Florida standards. And then what it does is it tells you real quick, after that LSA has been given, the number of items that were corresponding to that standard, and then the percentage of students that were either kind of sort of mastered, working towards mastery, or could use some extra help. And so in this particular situation, you can see sort of the breakdown that would be presented to teachers just instantly on their classes. What's neat about this is that if we go to student item analysis, what they will have options to do is they'll have options to drill in a little bit deeper. And one of the things that's really, really neat is that, of course, these are made-up students at this particular point because it's a demonstration site. But basically what they would be able to do is they would be able to see the percentage that were scored, the number, and then, of course, each one of these by standard or by item, how they scored, what they scored, and then also whether or not that score was incorrect. And there's even some really, really awesome analytics that if we were to pick one of these items, and Betty, if you want to pick one of those items, and then if you click there, you will actually get like a little bit of a cue card. And then if you click that little circle with the, yeah, you're good. Did you click it? Okay, you're good. Yep. So then what will happen is up at the very, very top, you'll notice that the graph, the corresponding graph, will tell you either by district, by school, by class, those analytics, and then you'll be able to dig in deeper. So what I think we have the ability to do in the next little bit, and you can actually pull, you can do all kinds of neat stuff, like you can look at the item, see how they scored. You can actually pull out a paper copy of their test if you wanted to go through it with the student. But I think the most important thing is these analytics that actually start taking place by standard will provide teachers with a real snapshot very, very quickly. And then what's even neat about that is you can start pulling in FSA data, take the corresponding standard, and see, okay, this is what you did last year, but this is how it's progressing.
So the teachers, in theory, will be able to say, oh, I did a lousy job of teaching this, I can reteach.
Or a great job. Or so, yes, yeah, exactly
Or
right.
They missed that because we haven't taught it yet.
And you're also
Right.
able to very quickly identify, like, if I'm just looking at this, the thing that's great about this is that at a spot check, I can go, something's up here, right? And so I can go back and take a look at that item, look at that standard, and then start to redress it. And that data happens the second the test is taken. So it's just bam, and then you're able to see it. And so I think analytics like this, and there's a lot more analytics to come, will provide us with really a snapshot to make things like the LSA very, very meaningful to folks. The best feature about this, too, is, or one of the best features about the assessment component, is that teachers will have the ability either collaboratively or individually to construct assessments. And then potentially if they want to go all in and link it to standards, and then they can use those assessments as like formative assessments to start building that. So they will have the ability to do all of that themselves, like I said, individually collaborate, or a school or district could design it and push it out. So there's all kinds of different options there that I think will make this a very, very powerful tool.
Right now, I know the instructional division has been working with teachers, collecting some feedback from them in regards to the LSAs, because we've heard that, obviously, that they'd like some revisions to that. So this is really driving a lot of that conversations to say, how do we go to more mini assessments that are teacher-generated or teacher-developed? where we've taught these 4 standards. Now we're going to go in and create a mini assessments to see how our students are doing with that standard. We've got the data. We know whether or not we need to reteach. We can form small groups based on that data. And so moving to that type of an assessment system rather than the current format for LSAs is something that we'll see in the coming year as well.
We have a survey that's out now, right? Yes. Saw that last, so it's survey to teachers right now, kind of get their input on it, so we can get some feedback and see sort of what they're thinking in terms of what's working with the LSAs, what do they like, what's not working, and then we've offered some suggestions and to see what direction they want to head, so.
So will the LSAs that they did take in December get into this, or
So the
does
score-
Eduphoria not
so
allow students?
actually,
Score.
yeah, the score is actually in there. Like if you go into one of the folders on that left-hand side of baseball card report or scoreboard, it's actually listed there. But it is just the total score because Eduphoria doesn't really allow you to pull it out by standard or so.
So it has to be created in Eduphoria?
It'll have to be created in Performance Matters for us to get these full analytics.
Okay.
But it will be coming next year
Okay.
as we phase the product in.
Yeah, we're moving away from Eduphoria, obviously, to using this as our assessment system. So that was one of the things, remember, what we said we'll eliminate some of these contracts, was we have multiple contracts, moving into one system in the future. So that's,
Does this have the ability to push out grades like Skyward?
No. No, it's, right?
I'm sorry?
This system doesn't have the ability to push out grades, I mean, we're not,
Oh,
since we
like
have
to
like
be
a
able to-
management system, a data management
I see what you're
system,
saying.
that's Skyward, and this is a learning management platform, that Skyward feeds into.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
haven't seen that ability in any Performance Matters district yet. It's something we can always, request as an enhancement at some particular point, but I haven't seen it in any of the districts.
I'm not sure that people know that system, parents, this is not a parent portal, there's no parent way to get into this, so this is an internal data system that Skyward feeds to, so,
I think one of the last things that I would kind of close with is that, like, you did mention this is what we call, one of the things we're trying to be this year is we're trying to be very deliberate about stuff, and I just happen to have this at the ready, so I thought I'd show it. But, like, we think all these applications have to tie together. They can't just be, like, randomly put together. They have to serve the entire instructional mission. And one of the things you'll notice is there's these different quadrants. One for the assessment tool, where right now you see Performance Matters, you see Eduphoria, you see Decision Ed, you see iReady. And part of our concern is that that's an awful lot, because what that means to me for teachers is they got to go into each one of these. And so part of the grand consolidation that's taken place is we did introduce one more, which I know sounds a little counterintuitive, but the idea would be that Eduphoria and Decision Ed, we will own Decision Ed. It can still float out there as a legacy application for a couple of years, but that Performance Matters will take the place of Eduphoria and Decision Ed, and then iReady will ship data to Performance Matters to try to get closer to that one-stop hub. I think that's important, is that we don't want to just keep adding things to this. We want to be very deliberate about what we put in and what it may replace. All right. So I guess that's all I got.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Reeks. And I will be the first one to comment that my Chromebook was easy to manage and
It
it
was.
worked well.
Not bad for $214.
Not bad for $214. Yeah, thank you. That was a really good idea. And your demonstration today was very effective.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. All right, I think we are at board member appointments. I don't know. I brought mine from before. So you guys have a list in front of you of your current appointments for our committees or your representative or appointments to those committees if it's not actual board members. So I'm going to start by asking, is there anybody that doesn't want to be on a committee that you currently sit on?
The,
There's no, oh, I was going to say,
No.
there's nobody that's, okay, perfect.
yeah, the, what's it called? Like the cleaning one. Keep Lake Beautiful. I am not very good at Keep Lake
Keep
Beautiful.
like beautiful.
Can we have a staff person? Because it also contradicts with,
Sorry.
Okay, so I wasn't very good at it either.
I thought you went and participated a couple of times.
I did,
in
I
meetings
did.
with
but,
Guilty
but
and
it,
stuff.
it clashes with our meetings sometimes.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I always felt guilty because, well, we've got a very active household, you know.
Yes.
I've got so many kids with so many extracurriculars, and I couldn't attend a lot of the events, so I felt guilty
Yeah.
about not
I
being
felt
able to be as
Keep Lake
active as I
Beautiful.
thought
I
I
can't
should have been.
Okay.
And it says or staff. And
But
I can't even find it.
I'd be in
Oh, here it
support
is.
of the staff idea if you've got somebody who's
in support of
Interested
keeping
in
Lake
beautifying.
beautiful.
Because there's no voting required.
You do
You
vote.
vote on things.
Yeah, you do vote. I
Yeah,
don't
but
know
you're
why
a
it says no
non-voting
voting.
member.
Oh, yeah, you get to vote. You get to vote.
Oh, is that right?
It's
Yep.
not required, but you get to.
Oh, okay.
Well, let me ask the board members, is there, Mr. Matthias or Mr. Gamble, are either of you interested in that committee particularly? Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We painted
That was
Claremont
not-
Elementary one time.
Do you have a staff member that you would
A
want to
lovely
be on there?
committee, I just.
Yeah.
I am so sure that we can find a staff member who would love to serve on that committee.
Members of the public?
I saw Mr. Carr raise his hand. Did I see? I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
We have a
Right.
horticulturalist.
I think Mr. Bach wants to show his
Oh.
softer side.
Mr. That'd be counterintuitive staying in your office. Right? Okay, so you'll bring us back somebody?
I heard your directive on that one, yes.
Okay, so,
And
and
then,
then,
did you want me to take over the coalition? Or do you wanna keep doing that?
I like going to the Central Florida Public School
that's
Boards
fine then.
Coalition meetings, but I think we can all go. I think I've told you guys that multiple school board members from other counties come. Seminole County generally has 3 or 4 board members
Oh.
there. Orange County has 3 or 4 board members there. So I know this suggests that it's just one of us, but I don't necessarily think.
Okay, so
Okay.
as I can, I
Yeah,
can just,
yes,
okay.
everybody
Because I
can
was
go.
gonna ask to get on the agenda next time, but but that language may actually already be going through, so.
Okay, so I think we'll be okay. If not, we'll come back. Definitely.
Okay.
Everybody's on. I know, yeah, you are automatically on the audit committee,
Right.
right?
And now, I am alternate for the FSBA, but I'm not a member.
So we'll take you off that.
Yep. And I've been doing that.
Good. Keep it up. You're doing a good job.
I'm going.
Okay, the legislative liaison to the state, it says me until February 2017. That's last year.
I think we need to continue that.
Do you want me to take that over?
I don't, it doesn't, yeah, that's fine.
You're the
Good.
logical person for that one.
Yeah. And then I'm taking Gamble off alternative?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. There was
Oh,
another one.
And
Yep.
Stephanie,
Yep.
our legislative liaison will be going to the Central Florida Coalition meeting from now on. We will have at least one of their representatives.
Okay.
Oh.
Good. That's awesome.
All right.
I know the Board of County Commissioners, is that, Mr. Dodd, that was you?
Yeah, that
Because
should
it's
be you.
chair, that's me
Mhm.
now.
That's right.
Dr. Burns, do you want me to put you on the Central Florida School Board Coalition, just so you're there? There's no reason why we can't have,
As like an alternative or something?
or just on it?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. All right, any others? The Chamber Alliance has not been meeting regularly, just so you guys know. I know some of these. Mm-hmm.
And I think we had the chair was the liaison, but they have on the 16th, it's more informal, but they asked me to come over and answer some questions about what we're doing or something.
So do you want to be on that committee?
They meet at like 7:30 in the morning.
That's even better. I have 3 kids to drop off at 7:30 in the morning.
I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. That'd be
Perfect, all
fine.
right. Chamber Alliance.
It's not even like definite they're reforming.
Right, yeah, they haven't in a while. They haven't met in a while, so it has not been overburdensome. All right, Gamble. And then are you guys all okay with your appointments
fine.
for your audit, your calendar, and your current committee?
Yes.
Calendar, no new appointments needed.
If somebody would like.
Do we
to be
still
on the
have a
NPO,
software
I don't
committee?
care.
They have not met in the entire time.
What is that?
The software committee.
Oh, okay.
Yes, no, they don't meet any longer. We've kind of taken a different approach when we're no longer doing the logic model, and I think that was part of what that committee had kind of taken over that. But now if schools want to purchase software, we're supporting them where we can, and where they have the financial resources to support it, and where our system can support that. So we're not looking at every piece of software.
And what about the Juvenile Justice Council? I've never been contacted or any information.
Juvenile justice.
I don't know.
You gave me the number?
No, I gave the juvenile
Oh, then my number.
So
Okay.
if they have your information, they'll call you when they need you.
That's, I don't mind staying on it, I just have never heard him.
Some of these committees I've never met on either.
Okay.
so. And I did get a letter from, it seems like it was a while ago, from the Board of County Commissioners asking for an appointment. And I pulled this out to bring, but I didn't take that letter that was sitting right on top, so I'll double check with that. We may have already done it. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Okay. Okay. I'll double check whenever I get home. That letter's sitting right there to bring. Okay. Perfect. All right, appointments are okay, and in regards to your audit committee, that looks like the only one that's, I don't have the list. Yes, everybody's good?
I'm not going to complain.
Okay.
But my name's not on here a whole lot of times, because I've just now transitioned some over to Stephanie.
Right.
So if somebody feels like their plate's a little full from the buffet, then then I might be able to assist in some way.
Mr. Campbell, are you?
Well, the MPO.
Oh dear. Except for the I did that one once. Actually,
Well,
a whole year.
I did that one once.
The thing that,
Like literally once. I did it for a whole year.
the thing that I was amazed at is we're a non-voting member.
That's right.
I'm like,
And like
I've
this,
made all
So
these
what's the
efforts to be
purpose?
here and I can't vote,
and this much of it actually has to do with schools.
Yeah.
You know,
so.
You want the Keep Lake Beautiful again? Is that what you're suggesting?
you want me to go back? Well,
Is
if,
that-
I mean, if there's no staff member that, if there's a dedicated staff member who already regularly has that passion and wants to be involved in the community, then that would be the more ideal.
I think she's just kidding with you. We got it. We got that one covered. Don't worry about it.
You just said you wanted more.
We don't want to be involved
Mr.
in
McDonough.
that.
No, that's not what I said.
If you want the Value Adjustment Board, that's a good one.
The Value Adjustment Board.
Yes, sir. Trust me, I'll speak to you later about it. Legit.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll do that one.
I'm taking notes on two different papers. Okay. Okay.
Remember, you just had a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, he didn't, his wife
I
did.
still got to pull my fresh hair.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so are we good? Okay, perfect. Natalie, do you want my copy where I scratch things off, or are you good? Okay. Okay. All right, we are on board member comments, so coming down to you, Mr. Mathias.
Thank you. I was invited last week and had an amazing conversation with all of the city managers, and they brought their police chiefs. And there genuinely is a complete spirit of supporting whatever we want to know, whatever we decide to do. Then there was amazing support from those city managers and from their police chiefs. Now, there was a lieutenant, his name is Lieutenant McDuffie. And Lieutenant McDuffie is, let's just say he's bad to the bone, and he's like a SWAT guy. And so he brought up, Chairman Luke, you had mentioned this ALICE program. And I think that is, he gave a full overview of what that involves, and I think it's brilliant. And it's something brilliant that we can do to keep our kids safe with no real cost, quite honestly. And so I think, Superintendent, you may have spoken to the sheriff.
I did, yes. He and I talked about it last week as well, and so he has some modules that he can actually provide, and we can, what we need to talk about is how we want to implement that.
Yeah.
That was one of the items that I referenced on the survey that I sent to you all that we can talk about in a few moments.
Well done. Okay, and that's it.
Good, thank you. Dr. Burns?
Yeah, I wanted to address this ongoing witch hunt that the Daily Commercial has been going on about. First of all, me going to speak at a Democratic meeting is my job, because speaking with my constituents is my job. So I'm just doing my job when I do that. As for our staff meetings, I was here when we had the previous administration, and I can tell you I spent at least 2 to 3 days on the phone dragging down people, getting calls back, talking to each person who was listed on the agenda, and now, instead of having to spend 2 to 3 days doing that and getting calls back and playing phone tag, I meet with everyone and have simple questions answered. It simply makes our government run more efficiently. And it's ridiculous that there's even a suggestion that it's not legal, because if anyone had done any investigative reporting, they would know that this is done with almost every efficient school board member across the state. So, I'm rather frustrated with the constant attacks on the lack of, on trying to stop me from doing my job. This is just doing my job, is to find out answers. That is my job, so that I can make proper decisions. It's fully within the Sunshine Law, and I know that if you report something often enough, then you can get people to believe it as truth, but this is not true. This is actually false news. As far as the SHADE meeting, we have SHADE meetings as opposed to the county commission because we are in charge of 42,000 children. And I am not willing to put the lives of 42,000 children at risk in order to make the public feel that they can know exactly where our security cameras are. That's unsafe. So the reason we have SHADE meetings and had this meeting in the SHADE was for that. And you have put your trust in us as public servants. And I ask you to have trust in that we follow the law. I'm very careful to never violate Sunshine. I almost never speak to these people. I have coworkers. I have coworkers I don't talk to. And I just am tired of the constant barrage of untruthful and false allegations in these editorials. So that's what I wanted to discuss. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gross.
Well, you were a little braver than I am. I'll tell you that I got a little riled up over the weekend reading the stories that were put out there. Not even just a story, but then an opinion on top of that. And certainly everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I guess that's where you might even have some free license to speculate a little bit, with the title of opinion. But you really can't speculate in a news story, and that's unfortunately what I see happening. And like you, I mean, I obviously was there at that SHADE meeting. I would not feel comfortable putting that information out there. There would be no point in having a safe and secure environment if you're just detailing all your plans for the bad guys. That's obviously clearly one of the exemptions that we've got to go into the SHADE and venture out of the sunshine. So I'd really love to see the focus direct itself more appropriately and accurately. Beyond that, I did have a moment where I got to enjoy our students for a little while, judging the history fair this weekend. Imagine science fair, but history. These students had produced fantastic projects, and some of them had even pulled out their art skills and had created some sort of model or other visual representation of whatever they were researching. Kudos to some of the kids who really went above and beyond, who tried to pick the most obscure event out of history that nobody would even know, so that would force them to really dive into primary and secondary sources, and they did a fantastic job on that. My goodness, because there's some level of to be said when you volunteer to participate in such an event, but but you've already got the background knowledge. It takes a whole another level of the student to say, we have not really talked about this in class at all, and I'm going to go on my own to research it and really pour hours and hours and hours of time into understanding this. So fantastic event, great job by the curriculum folks putting that on. It's a shame there weren't more people there to celebrate history, but really it was a fantastic opportunity. Commissioner Sean Parks and I periodically do coffee and conversations. We have the next one scheduled on our calendar for March the 15th that morning. We're going to be at Dunkin' Donuts in Mineola from 8 to 10 a.m. to hear from the community. We do these from time to time and love the opportunity to get out and hear from our constituents, to be able to speak in a more candid or informal manner, typically one-on-one or in a small group. So if you want some one-on-one time with your county commissioner or school board member, here you go. We've got one for March planned, another one for April. I'll give those details as they get a little closer, but March 15th at Dunkin' Donuts at 8 a.m.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Gant?
On another note, Friday had the opportunity to be at Seminole Springs Elementary to read Dr. Seuss with the children. Was there with the pre-K, and then the kindergarten kids, and that was a very enjoyable time. Anytime I can do something like that, I enjoy it. And then also that evening, had the opportunity to go to the Lake Sumter Elementary Chorus presentation, and once again, it was very outstanding. They bring in a special director for the chorus that evening. She works with them the day before and that day, and does a great presentation, and hats off to our kids in our elementary. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. I had also written National History Day down. I know I saw several of our Lake County students that are going to be going on to state, and wanted to say congratulations and amazing work that they had done as well. I also wanted to say good luck. We have a lot of our students that begin their FSA assessments bright and early this Monday morning. I know we're going on this week, so we just know that you could do it. We appreciate the hard work that you and the teachers have put in, and we can't wait to see what you guys do this year after our switch has been on that authentic literacy, reading and writing. I'm sure we'll see some amazing results from those children. And the last thing I wanted to say that nobody mentioned, actually, the hardest part about sitting in the seat, is we have a lot of sports starting, spring sports starting. We've had soccer games start. We've had Little League start around the county. It's last week, starting this week. And I just wanted to throw out there congratulations to all our volunteer coaches, because they do impact our students, our Lake County students' lives in amazing ways. And we're getting ready to kick that off. So good luck to all of our sports teams that are starting, and softball season's in full swing, and baseball season's in full swing. So we got a lot of really good sporting events coming up. If you aren't doing anything on a Tuesday or Thursday or Friday night, you can catch in some really good sports. So with that being said, yes, you can add it.
Since you brought that up, I was at the opening day this past Saturday for Tavares youth baseball, and they celebrated this coming Thursday. The person that threw out the opening pitch, he's retiring this coming Thursday. He'll have 34 years, 4 months, and 1 day. He's retiring because of 2 heart attacks he's had recently, but he's been very faithful and very good for our recreation program and parks here in Tavares, and his name is Perry Reagan, and he's from Umatilla. So he was talking about some things that he's going to be looking at to volunteer at with no pressure, and I said, well, you could come up to Umatilla softball field,
Right.
and you can help me up there get that field where it needs to be. And he said, I'm not going to take any orders from my daughter. Talking about my daughter, that he's adopted. So, but he has been very faithful, and I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. And my last note is to Mr. Weeks and his staff. They actually came. We were talking about our accreditation report and technology and getting that into the hands of our teachers. And the last 2 weeks in a row, he has spent some time with current UCF students and infusing Google Classroom and the Google Suite with them, and how to use technology in their classroom, because they will graduate in May, and we're crossing our fingers they will all come into Lake County school system. And on last Tuesday night, he went and supported current Lake County teachers in their use of Dash robots. And with our grant, we got to give every one of the teachers that attended one of those robots. Then I know they are dying for more. So I will just tell you that it was nice for us to see you here, as dynamic as you are, and we appreciate all of the extra time you put in to help our students and our teachers grow in technology. So we really appreciate you and your staff. Superintendent.
Going back to your sports topic, congratulations to the Leesburg High and their regional championship last Friday night. We're excited. So they're going to the semifinal, made it to the Final Four. I believe it's Friday in Lakeland that will be the semifinal round. We wish them all the best as they head back to hopefully that state championship again. I did want to mention that the Governance Committee for the Health Science Collegiate Academy met last week, and they have suggested that we bring in a third party to help negotiate the operational agreement. If you remember, there was lots of conversation about the fee structure that's within the operational agreement. And they have recommended Bob McKee to serve as the third-party mediator to help with that operational agreement between the 3 invested partners, which is South Lake Hospital, us as a school district, and Lake Sumter State College. And while this doesn't require any action on your part, we did agree that we would bring it back to our respective boards to make sure that there's no objection to Bob McKee serving in this role as we move forward with the operational agreement. So if there are no objections, we'll give the Governance Committee our approval to move forward. Okay, great. And I gave each of you a draft copy of the security survey. If you'll remember, you decided that we would not take any further action without first really reaching out to teachers and staff to find out what their feelings were in regards to our safety and security measures. So I did send that to you. It was just kind of a rough draft, my first stab at it. I didn't know if you had any feedback before we actually put together the survey. Anything that you would like removed, anything you wanted clarified or added to that survey, if you had a chance to look at it.
One thing I've heard is a lot of teachers saying they would quit if this were enacted. Or is there some way to ask how would you feel your safety would be impacted if? How do you feel your, like, I want to keep the question neutral somehow, but that's what I've heard a lot said. Would you feel that your safety would be impacted positively or negatively by the presence of staff or teachers with firearms on campus? Something to that effect?
Something to gauge their comfort level.
Yeah, something
Because they might not be interested in participating themselves.
But I've heard people say that they're very strongly for or against other people, and it goes both ways. There's people who are afraid to be on campus with people with guns, and people who are all for it. And so, it'd be nice if we had some question that, because we do want to have a good culture as well.
Okay, I will take a stab at trying to come up with something that I'll send back out to you to see if that meets your needs with that. The questions as they were just was one, do you support instructional personnel who volunteer to participate in the school marshal training program carrying a concealed weapon during school hours? And the other one was, do you support school personnel who do not have classroom duties? So you would like it further clarified as to whether or not in either scenario their level of comfort with
Yeah, or
in
do
general.
they feel it would affect the school climate, or their level of comfort, something to that effect?
Okay.
I think that first question would kind of answer no, if you support them. I think the first question there, if you support the school marshal program, kind of answers that. If they do or don't, that would let you know about their comfort level, I kind of think. You know, whether they're for it or against it.
Yeah, I don't know why I felt like there was, I don't know, further
maybe some-
clarification. I don't have the survey right in front of
I
me.
guess the bigger question would be, does that level of support change if the weapon is carried versus in a biometric safe? This refers to them carrying.
Okay.
um,
Yeah, absolutely. I can add a question specific to that, whether or not it's on the persons or whether it's accessible through the safe. That's a good.
The other element, and I don't know that this is necessarily the best vehicle to gauge this information, was the mental health aspect. I know that was the other prong of the governor's approach. And my experience in the teaching side was that there was a very lengthy turnaround time to get students the services that they needed. So I don't know if you want to kind of gather some feedback in a more of a roundtable format from teachers, but that's the other piece that I'd be interested in getting their feedback on as we figure out how to successfully implement solid mental health.
Yeah, and I obviously didn't address that
Right.
here because I know that we're all in favor of increasing mental health supports.
Right.
So I felt like the survey would just result in what we already knew.
That's
is
right.
that. So in regards to that and the implementation of that, I think my rationale for not including it is wait and see what dollars we actually get and then how we would best utilize those dollars. But if the governor's proposal, because since we don't know where we're going to end up with the House and the Senate in terms of the budget, it was specific that you would have mental health supports in every school, which is something we would all want to see depending on the dollar. So I think once we know the dollar amount, know what we're playing with, I fear that it's not going to be enough to do all of that. So then we will need to set some priorities. And so at that point, I think we would go back to stakeholders and ask how do we want to utilize these dollars most effectively. So
Yeah, spot on.
okay.
And you're right, actually, I misread that apparently. I never envisioned teachers actually having concealed weapons on them. I mean, so.
But the Sheriff Grinnell multiple times said concealed carry. He wants there to be concealed carry.
Well, could we then add the biometric component?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to add that one.
Yeah. So it'd be more, yeah, that way you're
Yeah.
gauging it.
And if you feel like that third question in regards to teachers, if you just want to take that off altogether and not even consider it, but we haven't decided that as a board, or you have not decided it, so I didn't want to just assume.
What?
Which one?
Do you support instructional personnel who volunteer
Oh, no, I think
to
that's brilliant.
participate?
Well, I think we have to ask, yeah, I think we have to ask.
Okay,
that
we'll
question.
leave it on there, and we'll add one about them not being on their persons. Okay, very good. The last thing I had is, and some of you have seen these flyers, but they're all going out. I just share them with you. This is a great opportunity for us as a school district to host a public viewing of the documentary called The Ripple Effect with Kevin Hines. And so we have, in partnership with the AMC Theater here in Leesburg, we have scheduled a public viewing. We have actually one of the theaters rented for the evening. And thanks to the Education Foundation and members of the community, we've been able to purchase some tickets for that. So we'll be able to give out some free tickets, or you can go online and purchase tickets for $12 a piece. We want to rally the community. We think that this is something that we all need to come together on with a clear understanding. And Kevin Hines is, even though it's specific to suicide, his message is really not specifically about the act of suicide, but the thought behind it and the mental health aspects of it. And he talks about, if you don't know who I'm talking about, this is one of the only people who have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and actually survived. And his story is really about healing and how do you move on with recovery efforts. It just meant a lot I know Mr. Gamble and I both had a chance to hear him speak, and it was interesting how he explains how the mind works with a person who's dealing with some mental health issues, separating the actions that they have and the thoughts that they have. And it was brought a lot of clarity to me, and so I think this will be an opportunity for all of us to have a better understanding and then talk about, as a community, how do we move forward in better supporting our students with mental health issues, and just as a community, creating greater hope and healing from these types of mental health issues. So I hope you'll put that on your calendar, and you'll continue to hear about this a lot in the coming days and weeks. And if you would like to sponsor a group of seats and purchase some tickets, then our goal is to hand these out to teachers and staff and giving them free access to the film, because I think that they will be particularly meaningful to them, and then opening it up to parents and to come with their children as well, we think would be good.
What's the recommended age and how long do you think it lasts if it's a 7:30?
It is a 90-minute documentary. It is teen approved. I'd have to ask what that actually means, but they say that it is appropriate for students to come and view, but they do recommend they come with a parent. We will have some mental health supports with live stream there that evening, so that after the film, if there's conversation or questions, that we can continue the conversation. So this is actually the same evening as the Take Stock in Children signing event, which will be just down the street. So we're hoping to just pick up and move to the theater for the documentary following the Take Stock event. So
$12.
that's all I had.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, apparently over the weekend, one of the local papers had comments about something to do with school. Some time ago, I eliminated that stress by canceling my subscriptions. So I don't find out about these things until a little later. But if they are the two items that I heard, which was the use of the staff meeting to relay information to the board members, certainly that I've already provided the opinion both to the chair and to the superintendent and to most of the board, not all the board members, that that's perfectly legitimate. It is not a violation of the Sunshine Law, and challenged the person who wrote the article to come up with some reason why it was a violation of the Sunshine Law, and that I haven't received that. And the other issue, I'm assuming, is someone complains about the confidentiality of the closed session that we have before the board meeting. There are 3 areas where school boards may meet out of the sunshine. One is it for union business, one for litigation matters, and the other is to discuss confidential security matters relating to the security and safety of the children. That's clearly spelled out. Anybody who thinks that that is not a legitimate basis for meeting out of the Sunshine Law is confused. And again, if that person has some information or some basis for making that opinion or decision, then I'd like to see it, because I'm unaware of any at the moment. That's all I have.
being said, this meeting is adjourned.